The recent Thor Love and Thunder trailers have left many fans ecstatic for the return of our favorite god of thunder, as well as the debut of the mighty Thor and the Greek pantheon of gods, among multiple other aspects that Thor Love and Thunder promises to bring to the big screen. Among these widely anticipated arrivals is the return of Thor's trustworthy hammer Mjolnir, now set to be wielded by Jane Foster, as she debuts her own superheroic monitor as the mighty Thor. Quite famously, however, Mjolnir is only able to be lifted by those who are considered to be worthy, which so far is a strict criteria that only a few individuals have ever achieved. So how exactly is Jane Foster able to wield Mjolnir? Is she worthy of the hammer's power? Is the enchantment even still viable? And if not, what are the two primary reasons why it would no longer have the worthiness requirement to wield Mjolnir? Well, stick with us today, watchers of the Marvel Multiverse, and let's discuss just that. The first question to address is whether or not Jane Foster is actually worthy of the hammer and its inherent power. Throughout the course of the MCU, this worthiness requirement has been incredibly firm, and it's been very difficult for anyone other than Thor himself to wield Mjolnir. We are currently unsure if characters like Vision are worthy, and the fact that he was not summoned lightning from the mighty weapon seems to support the theory that he's only able to wield it because he's a synthetic being, and is not actually worthy and might not actually be worthy to wield Mjolnir based on his own consciousness and goodness. While again, we don't know this for certain, even if he is truly worthy, it is because he was one of the strongest senses of morality of anyone in the Marvel Universe, and his programming dictates that he care for all human life, therefore allowing him to wield Mjolnir successfully. Likewise, Captain America Steve Rogers is one of the paragons of morality, being nigh unshakable in the face of temptation. And even the strongest morally devoted individuals that we know of pale in comparison to Steve Rogers. While Jane certainly is not a bad person by any means, we know of multiple good people who were unable to wield Mjolnir, and seem to be relatively level with Jane Foster in terms of being a quote-unquote good person. Both Rhodey and Bruce Banner, for example, tried and failed to lift Mjolnir, and both of them have shown to be selfless, generous individuals who care for the safety and well-being of others. It's also important to mention that Bruce is likely not inhibited by the presence of the Hulk simply because the Hulk and Banner are two separate entities, and it therefore stands to reason that one could be worthy while the other is not. Though Jane isn't necessarily a bad person, her actions show her to be little more than average, and as for her last appearance, it's unlikely that she's worthy in accordance with her action, and her behavior as far forward as Thor the Dark World. She could have undergone further character development in recent years that might have actually made her worthy, however, but we have not seen this as of yet, and there is still little evidence to suggest that she had a truly moving character journey since her last appearance in Thor the Dark World. Even if she follows the cancer storyline from the comics, we have not seen any evidence thus far that this will come to fruition on the big screen, though it is still very possible. So then, does this mean that the enchantment is no longer valid on Mjolnir? Is the worthiness requirement no longer a necessity for wielding one of the most powerful magical artifacts in the MCU? And if so, why is this? And why is the enchantment no longer active? Well, first, let's address what might have caused the enchantment to be lifted from Mjolnir. The first option is the death of Odin in the opening hour of Thor Ragnarok, which is supported by scenes from the very same movie. We know that Odin's death was the direct catalyst for Hela escaping her imprisonment, and Odin cites that his own waning strength is causing the magic that is holding Hela captive to fade. Once Odin dies, the enchantment holding her in place fails. If the enchantment that Oda placed on Hela dissipated after his death, then who is to say that the same would not happen for his enchantment on Mjolnir, or any other enchantment that he cast throughout his long life? In this case, Mjolnir might still be an incredibly powerful warhammer, but it might be usable by virtually anyone who tries. It could also explain why Hela was able to catch Mjolnir, because there is very little evidence to suggest that she is worthy of the hammer's power. One important detail to note is that even though she herself once used the hammer in battle, that being Hela, Odin placed the enchantment on it long after her imprisonment, and she likely would have been subjected to the hammer's worthiness requirements following. However, Odin at this point was officially dead, and even though he had only been dead for a few brief moments, the enchantment may have actually been lifted in this very moment that Odin passed. If Hela didn't even have to be worthy worthy in the first place, then that might be how she caught the hammer mid-air in Ragnarok. This means that when Mjolnir is ultimately repaired, it will not have the same prerequisite worthiness, and it might mean that Jane Foster was free to lift the hammer of her own accord simply because Odin is no longer alive. Another option is that the enchantment itself was destroyed along with Mjolnir, and when it was repaired, the enchantment did not maintain its validity, though there is more evidence to support the first theory over the second one that we're proposing. It does, however, bring up an interesting bonus question to consider. Was Steve Rogers ever truly worthy in the first place in Endgame, or was he only able to lift Mjolnir because Odin was not alive in 2023 during the events of Endgame? Was Steve ever worthy in the first place? Well, hopefully we can answer that question. If Mjolnir was separated from a place and time where Odin was alive and his magic was present across the universe, then is it possible that Mjolnir lost its worthiness enchantment upon entering the 2023 alternate timeline? Interestingly enough, we never see anyone else ever even attempt to lift Mjolnir, and in combat with Cap, Thanos catches Captain America's hand and not the hammer itself. While this might prove that one of the most significant scenes in the Marvel Universe is now null and entirely insignificant, there is actually evidence to suggest that Cap was in fact worthy, and was worthy of the hammer's power, and the scene where he lifts the mighty weapon was truly and honestly an earned one. This is because he also needs to return the hammer Mjolnir to the past in its original timeline, and based on the respective locations of the Infinity Stones, we know the likelihood of his first stop being in 2014 is 1 out of 3. This is because he had 3 years to return to 1970, 2012, and 2014 respectively. He had to return the Soul Stone, the Reality Stone, and the Power Stone to 2014, and if he simply dropped the hammer here, then Thor could have summoned it back at any time and fixed the timeline. If, however, he decided to return the Space, Mind, or Time Stones first, then he would have made his way back to either 2012 or 1970, and it's very likely that Steve Rogers chose one of these 2 years simply because he knew exactly when and where to return the stones, having been there on his initial mission. He knows exactly where his past self was in the Avengers Tower, where he would have to return the Mind Stone, not to mention the Time Stone was probably the easiest of the 6 stones to return, and would likely be Steve's starting point. For these reasons, it seems likely that Cap truly earned the ability to wield Mjolnir, and was actually worthy of its power. But as for whether or not Jane Foster is worthy in the same way is currently unknown, and will have to be seen when Thor Love and Thunder releases this July. But anyway, my friends, what do you think of this theory and the brand new trailer for Thor Love and Thunder? Do you think Jane Foster is actually worthy, or do you think the worthiness enchantment is no longer valid? Which would you prefer to see from a storytelling perspective, and which approach do you think Marvel is going to take with the character? As always, my friends, hit that subscribe button to assemble and join our team, and I hope that you have a great day.